We have Stephen Kent. He is a spokesperson from Young Voices. He's also the host of Beltway Banthas podcast, which I am appearing on in a couple of weeks. We'll talk about that perhaps if we have time. But he's responding to a Huffington Post story, Behold the Millennial Nuns. Welcome, Stephen. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Glenn.
Good morning. So tell me about the story from Huffington Post.
Yeah, well, I think we both read it, and this story in the Huffington Post by Eve Fairbanks sort of chronicles this young woman looking at her friend group growing up, all becoming more religious over time, and not only becoming more religious, but becoming Catholic, and then a large amount of them seeking out the life of nuns. And this is in a group of like social media influencer type girls who travel the world. They're lifestyle Instagrammers, they're bloggers. They're the kind who kind of like wear their faith on their sleeve and do it very loudly and proudly, but really seeking out a life of really rigid boundaries in a way that you just wouldn't expect. You wouldn't really expect this from millennials, right? But it turns out, and Eve Fairbanks looks into this, that numbers are rising across the country, that people seeking out the life of nuns is actually dramatically higher than it was years before, and the average age is 24. Blew my mind, but it also makes perfect sense.
Why does it make sense?
Well, you said this on my podcast over the weekend, that young people are starving for truth. They live in a subjective world. It is a subjective generation by and large, where the world today seems to tell you that it can be whatever you want it to be and that there is nothing that is right and wrong. There is no black and white. And I think that is not squaring with a certain subset of millennials who are looking for something deeper.
I think that eventually really falls into recognition of the majority of people, no matter what age. You can live that life for a while where, it's just my truth that matters. But it will cause massive pain in your life. And if you ever want to get out of it, you're going to have to recognize that there are some universal truths that are just not changed.
Yeah, there was this girl in this study, or in this piece, that it said that when she was speaking to the Huffington Post, she said, there is nothing consistent in the secular world. It all is a moving target. Catholicism, by contrast, truth is a fact, and your obligations to other people and God cannot be trumped by personal truth. That spoke to me as well. I mean, this is sort of the thing that I deal with in my own life, with my own generation, and I think a certain part of the Protestant population, I grew up Presbyterian, and I now go to a non-denominational church. And there does seem to be, in this religious community, still a take it or leave it approach to religion, right? Pick what you want, a la carte. And it's not authentic.
It doesn't really work.
There's something wrong there.
Yeah.
The end of the study had talked about this research that was done by the Barna Group. And it showed that millennials, by and large, when they are asked about this issue, millennials of faith, they are asked about this issue, and they prefer traditional churches. They prefer cathedral settings. They prefer the preacher behind a pew as opposed to standing up and being like a motivational TED Talk speaker. We're swinging backwards. I mean, I think this has everything to do with millennials like building carpenter-style houses and wanting craft coffee. They don't want Keurig. They want the real thing. And some of them are going very far to find it. None is quite extreme, but I think that's the whole point. They're the OMG generation. They do everything a little bit over the top.
I think there's something to be said right now. Everything is personalized. In somebody's life, you can get it exactly the way you want it. I grew up in the generation where McDonald's was like, no, it's the Big Mac. That's the way we make it. You don't like it, go pound sand.
It's in the heating lamp.
Our Big Macs yesterday were very customized, I would like to say.
So it's, I mean, that's just the way it was growing up because we were still in the, the mass production, world where we thought mass production was great. Because, 100 years before, it hadn't been mass production. Well, now that we've had mass production, now we're looking for things that are unique and customizable and uniquely us. The idea of swinging back to the old world, I think, starts there. Is something handmade? Is it for the individual That kind of stuff makes a difference, and it goes back to making things by hand or being quiet. When the world is screaming, there's going to be a yearning for a quiet place. When everything is loud and vibrant, there's something to a big, dark cathedral that is absolutely silent.
I mean, it would also speak to the rise in yoga and meditation as being something that people are seeking out. They're tired. They're everywhere they go. They're stimulated, and people don't have the discipline now in their daily lives to actually be in a place of quiet.
There's not. I was thinking about this the other day because I think we're approaching the moment that the Beatles did Revolution, which is 1969.
Okay.
And 1969 was the year that all this nonsense just started to come apart and fall apart. And that was the year of Altamont, and there was stabbings at these peace festivals like Woodstock. We had gone through the shootings of JFK, Malcolm X, RFK, MFK, Martin Luther King, and people were sick of it. They were just sick of it. And there was this moment where the Beatles stepped out and said, you want to hold and carry around pictures of Chairman Mao? We want to change your head anyhow. No one will follow you. And they made a statement of, you know what, we're not with you. And that one iconic band, even though they had all of this music that was supporting this debauchery, which they don't have now. There is no cultural, there's no cultural tie that ties all of this progressivism and nonsense of how many genders there are. There's no iconic look or music, like there was in the 1960s. The one thing that accompanied the change was a revival of the churches. There was the Jesus movement. And it didn't go back to the cathedrals. It went to, hey, Jesus is a cool guy. And that was a good example.
Changed my relationship status to in a relationship with the Lord. Yes.
Yeah, right. And that's the one thing that's missing. When that starts to happen, I think it will officially be on the downslope of this insanity.
Yeah. I mean, I just relate with this entire thing. Where I've been on the search for my own church for the past 10 years since I left home. I'm 29. I'm 29. So I went to college, fell out of church, then tried to get back in, but started going to sort of these like rock band churches, right? Where it's like a TED Talk and then there's bands playing. And I just felt oppressed by the cheese. I couldn't do it. And I've just found myself over time just longing for my Presbyterian church growing up where they sang hymns. Yeah. Right? And you were like the only young person in the pew.
They didn't have any projectors to show you the words on the screen.
Yeah, and I thought I was an outlier. But this entire piece in the HuffPost says that is actually a trend right now that is swinging.
It's really strange because my faith, if we don't have projectors, it's against rules to use projectors.
Yeah, very traditional, right?
Very traditional. All old hymns. It's an organ. I mean, it is as traditional as it comes. And a lot of people in my faith are like, Could we
turn the lights on? Is that possible?
Could we have heat? I mean, and this whole thing has come and gone, or is starting to wane, of the big, loud churches. And I like occasionally going in. I mean, go to
I'm not as negative as on it, but I think that's the whole point, right? Like,
but there's good ones and bad ones.
Yeah, the choice is important, right? I think there's some things that it depends on what serves you best, right? Yeah. What furthers the end mission.
And you go to a really good one, though. You go to a really good. The Gateway is a good.
The particular music.
And
is
your
really
past
good.
guest, Mark Batterson, I used to go to his churches when I lived in Washington D.C. Fantastic, really great balance, and that actually was not necessarily the rock band style churches or TED Talk speaker. It was the movie theater church